crafting order system. So there's a new trade organization called the Artisans Consortium, right? Now, this does mean you pay them a fee when placing a crafting order. So the person who places the order will pay a fee. Okay, so that eliminates some gold from the economy. This is obviously the sort of thing that we do need to have happen, right? They need a way to remove gold from the economy. So that kind of works. Now, when somebody does that, a crafting order will appear on a UI that kind of looks like the auction house. So you've put your order into the crafting order system. A crafter then comes in. They can click on all the, see all the different orders, work orders that have been put in by other players. And they can click on an order and they can accept that order. Now, what's cool is that the person submitting the order can provide reagents, which of course will include soulbound ones. So let's just say a heroic raider gets a bunch of heroic raid resources. Then they want to get their bit of gear upgraded to heroic, they want a piece of heroic level crafted gear made. They submit the work order. With that, they put their soulbound reagents in. Then the crafter comes in, and they could perhaps put in some other things, whatever. And then they can do the craft. And when they do the craft, it gets mailed to the person who placed the work order. So you're basically hiring somebody else. It's almost like TaskRabbit or basically it's like Deliveroo, Uber, DoorDash, something like that. Just that it's, it is automated and the mail, they'll actually land in your inbox. So that's pretty cool. Now you can decide a commission for the crafter, do that kind of thing. So of course, if you're paying a higher commission, a crafter will be more likely to take on your job. There'll be something going on there. And this actually means that, if you're a crafter, you could go to the work order board, pick up a work order, do it again, and keep on doing it, and you're just there crafting shit. And as you're crafting shit, I suppose, Matt, you'll be leveling up.
Yeah.
Leveling up your crafting. Now, I'm sure there's times where you just want to bulk level yourself, up. In which case, of course, you probably won't be using the work order system. You'll probably just buy a bunch of mats and do it the traditional way. You buy a few hundred of various different things, you follow the guide, you do the crafts, whatever.
Yeah, I assume the work order stuff will mostly be for actual max level stuff and crafting.
Yeah.
I can't imagine this will backport too far or anything like that. Maybe who knows.
But the thing is, that's interesting. Cobra says it feels like a free-to-play game and it put you off Dragonflight. Honestly, I have no idea what you mean there. No. There's no way where this has the mechanics of a free-to-play game. That makes no sense. Really. The only thing that they've done is that instead of you standing in town using trade chat, spamming trade chat, I'm a crafter, I will do this. Instead of that, they have a UI for it. I don't know how that makes it feel like it's a free-to-play game. That makes no sense to me.
There was two other just chat comments I actually wanted to think because I think they're important. Vanilla said, for me, the best part of the system is the fantasy of it. Hiring an excellent crafter to make a rare item for you with stuff you got adventuring. And that's the thing that everyone who's talking about this, and especially because we've been trained to do this by even how we make videos, how everyone else makes videos, how everyone talks about it. We all come from the design critique side of things. Even if we've sometimes got no right to sometimes, but we do talk about the design of it and the systematic nature of it and what's the outcome, what's the input, what's the output. We're thinking about it from that sense. And if you think about it from the average player who just opens up and goes, I'm going to play the game, how do I feel? Not what's real, but what's the internal feeling of that player. That's exactly the stuff that this is about. This is about that fantasy. Because there's someone else earlier, Gungrave in some numbers said, crafting locked behind highest tier of instance content might as well not exist.
That's not
just
true.
Be a boss drop. And you can see how, if you think about it from this pure egalitarian, this pure I'm thinking about the pragmatism of the ins and the outs. I'm not thinking about the spirit of this or how it feels or any of the fantasy or any of the engagement. If you're thinking of this purely from the selfish standpoint, that is technically true. That it might as well be a boss drop. There's extra steps to getting your gear. But it will be considered like a backup in terms of a deterministic thing of, you get gear and then this region as well, so you can build them up. That's one of the intentions. But it's also, it feels cool. Yeah. It feels new. It feels different. It feels better. And this is one of two substantially new things that are very, very new that they're trying. And I mean, they did try something new. I'd say the only thing they really tried new that was super unique in the same way in Shadowlands was Torghast, and that obviously had a whole lot of problems occur from how it was handled. But this is the same stuff of them. They're trying new things that engage and invoke a new fantasy. And
it's that thing where
newer.
People are so fucking primed to hate everything, and the devs have almost trained it that way.
Yeah.
Like, here's a great example saying, I'm right. I know I am very literally singling you out. I mean, I'm singling the comment out because I think it's interesting. I'm not like singling you out, so don't worry. Just says, wait. Soulbound crafting materials. I'm getting 35 anime for killing a boss vibe. Still excited about it overall. So here's the deal. See those crafting resources you get from killing bosses? Those are only for the highest levels of crafting gear that are equivalent to those raids. And those crafting resources that are soulbound are basically the equivalent of Valor points. They're basically crafting Valor points because we don't have Valor points in the game. But they basically fill that function. So instead of getting your VP gear from an upgrade vendor or just from a vendor, it's now tied into the crafting system. And I know some people will say that's like less efficient, but going to what you were saying earlier, Matt, it does mean like, okay, I've earned my resources to get this piece of gear. I will now put in a work order, and then a crafts person will come in and make it.
Yeah.
And that's like, is it less efficient than a vendor? Yeah. But I mean, look, I like games like Factorio. I like playing Tekkit in Minecraft. I like optimizing those things. But sometimes you need the flavor, you need the fantasy. So here, whenever you see the little flavor text as, made by and then a player's name, it's like, yeah, as a part of the work order system.
That specifically is a good one
for the fantasy of the game.
Because it matters more now. Because that's not made because they just went and spent loads of money on the mats. That's like they got the gear loop to get the gear to make it. Assuming it's high enough quality.
Yeah, and if it is high quality, like the person who made that, especially if it's early on, they'll be a really good, specialized blacksmith. Because I'll get onto that later. Because it's also kind of cool how they're trying to do that. Because they want a system where not every single blacksmith is the same.
Yeah.
But how do you do that when every single blacksmith can get to, max level? Turns out there's more than just level.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pretty innovative little system. I know that Alpha's on the BNet launcher, saw it in Wowhead.
Yeah,
that basically doesn't mean anything other than they're getting ready to hit the go button.
Yeah, which could be at literally any point in time.
Yeah. I would doubt today, though.
No, not... I mean, it is...
considered.
I'd be really pissed off because it's Friday evening, and I'd also be worried about them doing it.
Here's a good example. Sourman says, the work order thing I'm not a fan of. Why complicate it when I can just buy it from a vendor? This is the thing. In WoW, the Blizzard have treated us to not think about this as an MMORPG. They have treated us or trained us to think about this as a me game. Right? And as soon as an MMO turns into a game that's really about that is about efficiency and optimization, then you can have so much less of an MMO. Because the reason why, if you could just buy it all from a vendor, it's like, cool, that's just making a decision to not have this be tied into crafting. That then means that you don't have this like high-end aspirational crafting system where a player who chooses to go really deep into that, it means they can't shine.
Yeah.
Right? So the reason they've done that is because they want more aspects of the game to be tied together. They want there to be more of a social fabric and economic fabric so that it actually feels like a virtual world. Like, that's why. And I suppose if the feeling is just, well, it's less efficient, like, man, I don't know. Is Path of Exile a game that would be better for you? Like, do you actually... I guess I really want to sit down and think, like... I just want to say, like, do you want to play an MMORPG? And I saw you responding to Mr. GM and Towley and THD over the last while on Twitter. It's fun. Matt's been very violent on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I kind of
wake up, choose violence, always works.
I look
Twitter
at this
violence
and I just kind of think, like, are you guys, like, do you really want to play an MMORPG? And that's not really their fault. It's because Blizzard changed WoW to be less and less and less and less of an MMORPG over time. Yeah. And now what happens, because a part of an MMORPG is there being texture. And texture means friction quite a lot of the time. Now, people will think back to RuneScape. And a lot of people will think about RuneScape. They'll say, game was dead as soon as Grand Exchange came in. If you're not aware, the Grand Exchange is like a big Uber auction house where you're not buying or selling to an individual player. It's like more of a... It's just like this kind of like omni auction house thing, but it's not like it's individual listings. It's just, you know, all commodities, and the commodities have an almost WoW token, like sort of supply demand based pricing to them. But for a lot of people, the Grand Exchange was like the fucking death of RuneScape. It was so much more efficient to do your auctioning. Yeah, that's true. So you could get what you wanted quicker. But for a lot of people, what would happen in RuneScape is they walk to a place and they'd say, hey, I want a rune scimitar. Can anyone sell me a rune scimitar? Can anyone craft this? And then there'd be like a bit of a social interaction going on. What Blizzard are trying to do with the crafting order system is kind of like find a middle ground there where there is the human element and there is the interactivity between the different segments of the player base, but they actually have a nice UI that means that people aren't going to get scammed. There's not going to be any bullshit, and overall it will be a sort of a nice, decently efficient thing.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, so much of this just turns into honestly ask yourself if what you really want to play is Path of Exile, but with a third-person camera and a tank and a healer. Because if that is the case, then we need to have a separate discussion about what kind of game that you want. And it could actually be that that is a class-based, instance-based PvE, PvP, endgame-related game that is not an MMORPG. It is just a shared world game, a bit more of like a Destiny. So it's like, do you want to play Fantasy Destiny, or do you want to play an MMORPG? And I don't think that is a question that people really look into themselves about. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Blizzard it was always kind of going to happen because of how value in World of Warcraft always meant gear, and how so much of it was about like the social hierarchy of World of Warcraft meant gear, meant skill, and all that stuff. And I think it's almost like an inevitable direction, but every single... Yeah, it's almost like the quest tracker thing, right? Where every step they made to de-MMO and de-RPG, in the sense that role-playing game, not the sense of modern RPG, which just means we've put numbers in your damage. Thanks, Forspoken. Thanks, God of War. But it's like every change they've made has been... what do we think players want more based on what we've seen in player behavior? And that's a thing where they've kind of just been continually pushing players into their own little Skinner boxes, because that's what the data show and that's what the emotional reactions are of people. But that's not what the long-term joy has been. It's like the game has gotten more engaging, but it's gotten worse overall. There's no way you can look at like the tightening of the noose around World of Warcraft's neck in terms of player enjoyment and feedback every expansion and not draw correlation with how they've continually designed themselves into this corner of, we're making Fantasy Destiny and players are playing it, but they don't know why. They don't really know why they're playing it. They think they know. They're just kind of in this little suffering box of...
they're knee deep in their third tube of Pringles.
I log into World of Warcraft, running around in a circle, logging out because there's nothing to do, because there's no world. I have no reason to socialize. And obviously you have those problems where, you know, you look at FF14, it manages to keep up some social barriers and stuff, but a lot of that is players are given the sandbox to work with. And that's where World of Warcraft needs to put that a little bit more back in. And this is where, obviously, you know, I see people saying this doesn't actually mean people will interface with each other directly. And that's one of the problems that modern games have had a lot. Where over in some MMOs specifically, it's like, that'll be fine. And it's like, okay, well, we need a team of moderators and we need really clean TOS so people don't, I guess, piss each other off quite so much. But you look at every other game and social interaction, especially from that part of the world, when you look at like Riot and they're just like, you can't talk to your enemies in League of Legends anymore, sorry. Because that's too kind of, it's like the social interactions become handled via interfaces. And that's kind of annoying, but it's something we kind of have to live with. But this does just mean that lots of people will theoretically engage with each other more. And that's where World of Warcraft needs to develop towards. Because it developed itself into this hole. It needs to develop itself out of this hole. And the risk they're taking with doing this, and I think it's a risk, it's almost certainly a calculated risk. Maybe it's a desperate one based on the results, but the point I'm trying to make is they need to develop out of this hole. And by doing this, they'll teach players, or they'll give players more ground to work within, and then they'll kind of go, okay, well maybe I kind of instinctively don't want to deal with this because I've been trained this way, but maybe the detraining will work when people actually play and experience it differently. Maybe
it's
I'm not sure.
It's a lot more satisfying
to
cook yourself, to source delicious steak, cook yourself perfectly delicious steak with all the herbs and the butter basting and all the crazy shit, and to put all that effort in and to have a really nice thing at the end you can be satisfied about.
Yeah.
But the world teaches you to just eat those Pringles.
Exactly.
And the problem with WoW is that WoW has turned into Pringles for the longest time, right? It's just Pringles. It's fucking Pringles all the way down. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to make like more genuine interactions. They're trying to make more interesting systems. But the problem is everyone's fucking addicted to Pringles.
Yeah, well,
in the same way that, everyone's addicted to artifact power, so number go up. We know that artifact power is bad for game, but it's kind of like what people are addicted to because they need to make bar go up because bing, bing, wahoo, and the happy in the brain and the chemicals.
Yeah, so...
And how do you develop a long-term, sustainable, actually good video game when you've trained people to have the junk food version of your game that has preyed on their psychology to make them like the junk food and not be willing to put the effort in to do the right thing, even though the right thing, the harder thing, is going to be significantly more satisfying and fulfilling in the long term.
Yeah.
Because then the problem is, the only thing that you can't make the Pringles better. All you can do is eat more Pringles. So then they end up in this crazy situation where it's like, okay, if the zone that's came with this patch is a can of Pringles, the next zone's got to be fucking 2 cans of Pringles.
Exactly.
And then we end up in this bizarre situation where it's just, what's the latest rehash of the Time of the Isles? How will they make it more engaging than the last one? And we're not talking about, instead of just trying to find the most engaging version of the Time of the Isles with rares to kill and stuff, why are we not thinking about what other things could a zone be? Does every single zone have to follow that format? Are there times where the story could maybe dictate a completely different flavor of zone? Right? So it's just, we kind of end up fucking optimizing into the efficient, boring...
Yeah, and this is you see a lot of the response being, this has impact on my Pringles. I'm going to get less Pringles because you're making me you're putting this other thing on my plate that I don't want to eat. And that's what it is. And
eat your fucking grains.
Basically, because, in the middle of what I was saying earlier, Dak said, they think they do, but they don't. No, it's actually the opposite of that. It's, they think they don't, but they do. And I think that's the case that everyone will kind of understand instinctively, is you may not immediately understand that this will make the game a little bit more, could make the game more social, could expand the general horizons. But you think of, is it Plato's cave? You think of man in the cave. They don't know anything outside the cave. All they know is the cave. The shadow on the wall terrifies them. The prospect of outside is terrifying. You go outside, or you're a kid who eats greens the first time, and they are better for you. If you're not accustomed to it, it may feel worse, but it will just generally be better. Ideally, that is assuming Blizzard can develop it, and this doesn't go the way of World of Warcraft economy kind of problems, which is where all this Soulbound materials kind of has to come into to stop making it a big pay-to-win fest. But yeah, no, I think it's very important that Blizzard actually do this stuff, because if they just do what people on average tell them to do, they'll just have, okay, we'll make more M+ dungeons for you then, and we'll give you a 15 boss raid next time. And then we'll give you all the gear you want, maybe.
And then it's how did Blizzard make the game good?
Yeah.
How? Because then they're just adding content. They're just throwing slop into the pile instead of actually designing a great game experience. Because the funny thing is, so many super successful games, you just want to keep on playing them. Like they can survive through a content drought or whatever because they have the more sandbox-y elements. They have the natural social dynamics. They have maybe world PvP that people are engaged in. That right? So it's like, why do we need to think about the base, fundamentals? And the thing is, this crafting order system, a lot of people jumping to conclusions pretty quickly. There's a lot more to this.
Yeah.